Alrighty, y'all. Hello, and welcome back to looking at more Americans moving abroad. At this time, a little bit different of a subject. We're looking at Americans who moved abroad. What are the things you no longer fear? This should be pretty interesting. I have a feeling about maybe a couple things, but I'm anxious to see what will come up. Let's go ahead and jump right into it.
You're an American that has moved abroad, what are the things you've realized that you no longer fear? Because living in Australia, New Zealand, the UK, the Americans I've spoken to here, they all have the same stories about how they saw a fight break out across the room when they were out at a pub or something like that, and they realized they no longer fear that it could escalate into gunshots.
Oh, okay. At first, I'm glad I didn't pause it. I was gonna pause it and say like, wait, come on now, y'all don't have fights break out in a pub in a lot of countries. Like, come on, that's there's definitely some of that going on. I would imagine everywhere. But I get what he's saying. Escalating to, of course, pew-pews. Yeah, that's not any fun. Now, I will genuinely say, and this is just my opinion, that's the whole point of this, right? Is like one person's perspective, and that could be different for a lot of different people. There is definitely some sort of, you could say stress level you could have. I'm not a bar person. I don't go to the bar or the pub. I don't judge people that do. It's just not something I personally have done a lot. Now, when I've always went, in a very few times I have over the years, it's been a pretty good experience. Everyone was pretty nice and fun and social. But of course, I can see fights breaking out being a thing. I've known other people that have gotten into that situation. Of course, it can happen somewhere in the country, sure. But like if you're in this city or this town, I don't think that people literally fear for their life when they go to the pub. But I do understand like the concern that still is a possibility, more so than most countries. So for that, I can't really argue against it. It is freaky to think about.
When they all have stories about fireworks and realizing the day they realize that there are always fireworks now.
Yes, the whole was that a firework or a gunshot game? I feel like that's a uniquely American perspective on sounds.
They realize that they've been through an entire year and not had to worry about taxes because taxes are just calculated for you.
All right, now we're cooking. I'm glad he mentioned that. I was mind blown, absolutely mind blown to learn that in most countries, your taxes are actually done for you. Like it's just standard. That's not something you worry about. I thought that was like normal, but it's not. We're the weirdos here in the U.S., and I agree. I think it's horrible. Tax season is super stressful because they treat it as like this hammer down, like if you don't do your taxes correctly and if you don't do them on time, you're in big trouble, right? They make all these threats and they're going to garnish your wages and take your stuff. It's crazy, like the amount of stress you have to go through, like every citizen has to go through on tax day. It's kind of crazy. I shouldn't say tax day. You have like 3 months to do it at the beginning of the year. But, that 3 months goes by quick if you're not on top of it, and you have to figure out how to do it, or you have to figure out still how to have someone else do it, who to pay, and go to which tax service or which accountant. It's a big deal. It costs a lot if you have to pay someone, unless you find someone really good for a reasonable price. And then you have to hope that they're doing it right. And it's freaky. And remember, I always come back to this. I'm still going to say it for any new viewers. I grew up hearing also from some people believing that the U.S. was the best. Like we don't barely pay any taxes compared to other countries. The more I keep finding out, the more that's not true. We do pay taxes, and we pay a lot of it here in the U.S. You might be able to cite certain like numbers, like a certain tax bracket from another country, and be like, oh yeah, see, they pay more. Germany or France or whoever, right? They want to throw out there, oh, they pay more in taxes than us. But I don't believe it. We pay a lot of taxes. It ends up kind of stacking on top of each other. They still tax everything here, just like everywhere else. It just seems like they get a lot more for their taxes in other places. So I guess it seems like it's more worth it. Here, I pay a lot in taxes, trust me. I had my appointment pretty recently. Unfortunately, it just doesn't seem like it goes anywhere.
And they don't fear that they could get those wrong. They got ill and went to the hospital, and they realized they don't fear what it could cost anymore.
Yeah, I pay all those taxes, and I'm still on my own. If I get hurt, figure it out. You got to figure out health insurance. That's a whole confusing weird abstract deal as well. And you get to pay a lot for it here. You get to pay a lot for health insurance here. And guess what? Half the stuff, they might not even cover it. Or if you go to the wrong doctor, whatever that means, like the wrong one that's out of network, oh, they won't cover it either. Fun. It's fun here with that.
The police, and they weren't afraid. They requested time off from their boss, and their boss was just wondering why they made a big deal out of it. And they just said, book it in the system, because they get 4, 5, 6 paid weeks off now, and it's no longer an issue. There's loads of things. So tell me your stories.
These ought to be good.
I'm an American currently living in Canada. And everything that this original poster already mentioned are things that I would have said.
Yeah.
So I don't have anything to add in that regard, but what I sort of will contribute is that about 6 months into me living here, I've lived here for a year. It'll be a year next month. About 6 months into living here, I all of a sudden felt this extreme wave of emotion and physical release in what almost felt like, as somebody with an anxiety disorder, it almost felt like I was coming down from an anxiety attack out of absolutely nowhere. Everything was going completely fine in my life. Nothing had happened, and I couldn't figure out where this huge release was coming from. And maybe I did a lot of reflecting on it, and I realized that it was my body finally beginning to release the trauma of having lived in the United States for 23 years. My body actually began to physically process just the daily lived trauma of being from the United States and having just lived in Canada for 6 months. Not gone through anything extraordinary here. Just taking myself out of the environment.
Now, I don't want to take away from her story, so I'm not really commenting strictly on her because we don't know her story. We don't know where she lived in the U.S. and what had happened throughout her life or whatever. I'm definitely glad that she seems to be doing much better in Canada. That's cool. I've been to Canada. I'm a big fan of Canada. I think it's awesome. Awesome place. Beautiful place. Canada is a good mix of it's definitely intermingled with the U.S. We share a lot of, similarities and stuff like that. But of course, it is a lot different in other ways. And it's definitely, its own place. It's a huge country. And of course, it's very unique as well. But yeah, I've been there. I loved it as well. Now, I haven't lived there, so I can't speak on that. But I didn't find it that different. Now, that's what I want. I want to preface this as just my experience, and this doesn't speak for anyone else. But I didn't find it so different to where I would be 10 times more relieved and stress-free there. But maybe it would be if I actually lived there. I'm not exactly sure. I think that in certain ways there would be things that you would instantly, learn or connect and be like, okay, this is better here, right? I can totally see that. I don't know if it would exactly hit me the same like it did her. That seems a little extreme. As with Canada, you still have rules and laws. You still have stresses like traffic and crowds, taxes, and you name it, right? Now, of course, they do some things better. Of course, you wouldn't have the same healthcare costs, stresses, and stuff like that. I mean, pretty sure they still have crime and stuff. So I'm not sure I necessarily agree with this one fully, but I mean, I am glad for her that she's
being in the United States
doing much better.
That's huge trauma release
inspiring
for my body. It was the first time that my body actually felt safe somewhere. So that was really,
maybe she was
really
from
fun
somewhere really rough in the U.S. I'm not sure.
That is what I've put myself through for 22 years. I'm really curious if any other Americans living abroad have gone through that same thing.
That video is so good at pointing out all of the things that we live in fear of in the U.S.
Yeah.
And the one in particular that gets me is the idea that I have to fear losing my job every time I have to call out of work. And I have a part-time job that I...
Glad she mentioned that. That is a legitimate fear. I mean, to think when you have a job, especially when you're there a lot, you're there 5 days a week, 4 days a week, maybe 6, right? You're there, you've proven yourself, people there, your boss or your manager or whatever, You know, like people go through their jobs day after day after day. And then like once in a blue moon, if they are sick or they have a legitimate concern, or maybe they're just not feeling well, they're really stressed out, maybe they're actually sick, maybe they need a family member that needs help, you know, like the fact that you should be able to call out of work, you know, whenever you need to, seems like a reasonable ask. But for some reason, with like 90% of jobs, like there are good companies or maybe good bosses out there, of course, in the US that might be really great to work with and will give you time off, and you know it's not a big deal. But for some reason the norm is the opposite. The norm is you literally do fear when you call in. You have like that pit in your stomach and you know something in your throat, like, oh, I gotta get this call right, otherwise I might be yelled at and I might be threatened to lose my job, or I might literally lose my job. You know, this is a real concern for people here. The work culture is, in my opinion, toxic here. I've had pretty good luck, but I've had some awkward moments that, you know, luckily didn't result in me getting fired. But like, yeah, I felt the stress of that. I know many other people have. And from what I understand, in a lot of other countries, you know, as long as you don't abuse it, I'm sure there would be problems then. But if you're there and you're working all the time and you need a day off, you just call in and it's not a big deal. That's how it should be. I don't know why that's not a thing here for the most part.
I'm also a full-time mom, but I'm so scared of losing my job. And it's been so clear to me, like the fear is ever present this past week because I've had to call out of so many shifts. And I'm just like, I keep over explaining in every email whenever I have to call out.
That's relatable.
Because I'm like, I have RSV and I don't want to get anybody else sick. I don't want to get anybody else with young kids sick. But I'm so afraid of losing this job because like I really need it. And I don't have paid sick time or anything. Jeez. So, you know, like.
So I don't live abroad. I live in the States. But one of the neatest things happened to me when I was in Iceland a couple years ago. At the second Airbnb that I stayed at, I wanted to do just some day hiking because I was exhausted from a very long day that ended in climbing a volcano in the middle of the night before. So I asked the Airbnb host, I'm like, so where can I walk? And he goes, anywhere. And I said, yeah, but at what point will I be trespassing? When do I cross property lines? Are there landmarks that I need to keep in mind? And he smiled and he said, we don't have that here. You can walk anywhere. And I was like,
damn.
What? No Bubba with a shotgun going to come out and tell me to get off his land? And he kind of laughed. They just don't do that there. Life was fearless.
Yeah, that one is very interesting. That whole, I think at least in the EU, it's called like right to roam. And I know there's certain countries where maybe that's not safe to do, but it seems like a lot of countries you can, you know, pretty much, again, as long as you're respectful and not sketchy, you know, you have the right to roam around. You can cross property lines, and you shouldn't, you know, have any issues. Again, that is such a foreign concept as an American. Like, I don't know. I mean, I see it both ways. As someone who does have a pretty big, not big, I mean, I consider big like 40 acres or something. I don't have something like that, but I have, you know, a bigger yard, you could say, than most regular people in like suburban neighborhoods do. You know, they just have a little yard or whatever. We have a little bit of a land area around our house, but it's still all fenced in and stuff. And most Americans, I suppose that, you know, because that's what I am, like that's ingrained in us. Like I wouldn't really want people roaming through my property because that's just not really a thing here. You go to public places for that, you know. There's parks and, you know, national parks and just kind of open land that's not, you know, owned by people. Like that's where you go roam, or you know, go on your own property, right? Roaming through other people's properties, I just don't do and wouldn't do because, again, it would be a stressful state of mind. It could be risky. And I'm not one of those people. I like to downplay, you know, the videos that act like everyone has double drawn, like, you know, two pistols in their hand at all times in America. That's not how it is at all here. But at the same time, when you're on someone's property, it's different, right? Because, you know, people can, you know, stand their ground on their property and you don't want to mess with that, right? You don't want to sketch someone out and maybe they do come out with a shotgun or something. So yeah, that's just not something you do here, or at least in our heads, that's not something you usually would want to do. But in a way, in hindsight, it's kind of a shame because it feels like you're restricted. You'd really got to watch where you cycle and where you walk and, whatever, where you explore nature. Like you're kind of restricted, which goes against the whole idea of like American freedom, in a way, if you think about it. So when I hear about in other countries in Europe, for example, where you can just kind of roam anywhere you want, and as long as you're respectful, you can roam and explore and all these things. I feel like that is kind of more of freedom, freedom of movement,
The things that I no longer feared when I moved out the country. I no longer feared the police in any capacity. There was police in Jamaica that had assault rifles as their normal weapon, and I still felt comfort and ease around them.
That says something.
I no longer felt outnumbered in, any situation, because quite literally, everyone around me was black. I no longer felt the fear of exploring, like how you
That's
feel
a big
here.
one.
Because when I go places, I love to explore and go through neighborhoods and see things and stuff like that.
Yeah.
In America, you end up in the wrong neighborhood, that could be a death sentence. But when I was out of the country in Jamaica, I could explore any neighborhood, anywhere, and nobody be asking crazy questions like, who you, where you belong, this, that, and the third.
Yeah. That, I'm glad he said that. That could be a thing here for anyone as well in the U.S. Some places are better, like, I guess, like better spread and more intermingled than others. Chicago is famously, like, of course, a very big city. And I would say, like, in one very little way, it's cool. And in most ways, it's bad. So in one very little way, like, the good way is that it's fun to see, like, the different flavors of how segregated it is. And by that, I only mean that, you get, like, these different neighborhoods of, like, the Italian neighborhood and the Ukrainian neighborhood and the Lithuanian neighborhood and blah, like you have Little Village, which is like Mexico. You have Chinatown. Like they have all these different themed, like you get to kind of experience different things. And let me just say, like that's the only time where it's like kind of cool. You get to see these different vibes and flavors of different cultures. But at the same time, it's mostly a negative, right? Because Chicago is still modern day, at least I think, kind of like a pretty segregated place, right? You have all these pockets of different people and different skin colors and stuff. So he's right. It could be inverse either way. Unfortunately, you might be judged badly if you're in the wrong place. That's obviously a shame. It's really weird to think about. Now, I don't live in Chicago proper. I say that to people, that are not from the area because I do live near it, but I don't live in it. So where I'm at is definitely intermingled. Everyone, like all my neighbors, we all look different. So it's a lot better cohesion. Everyone gets along and has fun. But other places, that segregation is kind of weird. It's alarming. Again, someone like him finding somewhere where he can just kind of not worry about where he's at in town or what side of town he's at. That is just, it's got to be a freeing feeling. It's got to be great.
I no longer feared the end of the month and my cost of living.
Yeah.
Because in Jamaica, I ended up paying
terrible here in the U.S. It's unbelievable. It's the highest it's ever been.
About $300 in bills a month versus here where I'm paying over $5,000 sometimes.
Oh, in the U.S., yeah.
I never feared the people that, somebody could be having a bad day and then that be it for me, my life, and my daughter. Instead, the people were nice and friendly and this, that, and the third. I never feared expressing myself and who I was.
That's true.
I actually trained.
You know what? The U.S. is definitely in decline, and the reason you know it is society. I would say 20 years ago, maybe even 15 years ago, maybe even 10, but let's just say 15 years ago to be safe. You could express yourself. Didn't matter what politically you were, different sports teams, no matter how minimal or maximum importance the topic was, you could express yourself and everyone kind of got along. People might not agree or whatever, but people were pretty civil. Nowadays, between online, now, of course, online's a different animal, but still online is toxic energy here. And of course, in person too, some people are just so ridiculous. if you have an opinion on this or that subject, you're instantly, the division here is unbelievable. It's unwarranted. It's crazy. I don't care what you think about this topic or that topic. You're allowed to have your opinion. Maybe you have reasons for it. Maybe you don't, but you have an opinion, right? I have my opinion. Doesn't mean we have to be enemies. It doesn't mean we have to break out in a fight. It doesn't make any sense. I've caught flack for this in the past, and I don't care. I'm going to keep saying it. I hate politics here. It's so divisive. The politic culture here, you might not understand if you're from somewhere else. The politic culture here is absolutely toxic. And then there's different agendas that seem to be, every other month there's a new agenda being pushed out. And if you're not on board, you're, insert all these names. It could be really taxing on you. It could be confusing. The U.S., I'm glad he said that. The U.S. is very crazy when it comes to societal, pressures and standards and stuff. It's all over the place. And then you're dealing with the cost of living crisis and the housing crisis and, the government and all this stuff. It's like, oh my God, it just, I don't know what's left, right? Like, what are you supposed to do with your life?
Drastically more.
And you're
when I was
overworked
there because I felt less judged and I felt more comfortable to be myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I never feared for my life. I never feared for my well-being. I never feared.
You shouldn't have to fear being yourself, right? As long as you're not a just, grade A asshole to everybody for no reason.
Anything like that. And yes, I'm aware that countries have their own problems. And Jamaica has a few.
Other countries have problems too. It ain't just the U.S. I know there's more out there than most people might think or like to talk about. But the U.S. is just, it got this whole mountain of problems that seems to be getting bigger by the day. So it's easy to kind of highlight it.
None of them concern me too much because none of them happened to me. You don't understand how many things you really fear or how many things you actually have become accustomed to fearing until you leave.
Yeah.
Because I have never felt more at ease.
I think that's a good statement he said.
You know how many times I fell asleep with my door wide open and nothing happened except maybe a crab broke in?
Yeah, that's wild. I couldn't even imagine that here. Whew.
How many times I would
wake
just
up
be
to
out
an empty
walking
house.
around, no weapon
if you wake up,
on me whatsoever, run into a group of people and be like, "Oh, hey, what's up?" No need for social anxiety or nothing. It was freeing. It was peaceful, and it's home to me. Jamaica is always feeling like home to me.
Well, we're gonna end it on that one. That was awesome. That was very insightful. I think that guy's right. I sometimes I wonder why more people aren't. I know there are people out there that are concerned about all these crazy issues in the U.S. I think more and more people are starting to be concerned, but I wonder why it took so long, and I also wonder still why more people aren't concerned. And I don't know if it's that they're not concerned. I feel like so many people are on autopilot here. They're just going through their crazy busy life, and they're just trying to survive. And it's like, I don't know. It's kind of weird in a way, right? Like, how aren't people more kind of pissed and about some of the issues we have here? I feel like I'm very concerned and vocal about it on my channel. I have been for years. I've been talking about this stuff for 3 or 4 years on my channel. But I feel like other people don't. And that's fine. It's just I can't believe more people aren't thinking like this, at least when it comes to Americans thinking like this. I know other people recognize problems from other countries and they can see our problems here too. I just feel like a lot of Americans are blind to it, or I don't really know. It's confusing. I guess I've always been confused. When I see these random protests and stuff that they show on the news, it's how come there isn't protests for why our healthcare costs so much, how we keep getting screwed by stuff like that? Why isn't there protests about the job culture here and worker rights and how benefits are oh, you get a week of vacation a year? How is that a benefit? Should be a right, I don't know. I think a lot of things are tipsy-turvy and upside down these days. I still love this country. I think there's a lot of good to have from it. And I think that it's just up and down, radically up and then down. And it's a lot to deal with sometimes. I think it was good, or I should say, I think it was a lot better. Maybe it's because I was young and naive. I don't know. I feel like The numbers don't lie, though. I feel like it was a lot better here 20 years ago. And right now it's just in a really, really low spot. And damn, I hope something changes. I thought that was a pretty insightful video. I can't wait to see your comments on it. And if you agree or disagree, let me know. I appreciate you watching so much, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. My name is Ian. You're watching IWrocker. Until next time, y'all, stay safe out there. I'll catch you later.